Hello, welcome to the fourth act. We're going to talk about Captain Shazam.
We're going to teach you shit tonight. The fourth act gets historical. I'm Phil.
And I'm Alex. And we're talking full-on Captain Shazam today. And if you don't know what that means, then you should watch this whole thing. Because the war between Marvel and DC has been going on for many decades now. On the big screen, however, it's only heated up in the last 5 years or so.
You may be aware of this war that's happening. If you pick apart, you can really see the competition and kind of the grudge match that's been happening on about trying to get the audience and trying to get those box office results.
It's very surprising how much these two studios do to compete with each other on the big screen. We had Batman vs. Superman and Captain America Civil War came out within months of each other, and it's no coincidence that those movies both featured the respective studios' biggest and most iconic characters fighting it out against each other. And another such lineup is happening this year with Captain Marvel and Shazam.
But the feud goes deeper on paper than it does on film, 40 to 80 years depending on how you look at it. So let's just get into it. A long time ago, before Shazam became Shazam, he was known as Captain Marvel.
It started as far back as 1939 when a third-party comic book company, Fawcett Comics, had the idea to incorporate everything that made Superman popular, strength, speed, sci-fi element, and incorporate it into a new but different character that would be later known as Shazam.
Shazam?
But not yet.
It started out under the name Captain Thunder, but cannot be trademarked due to a copyright issue. Fawcett comic artist Pete Costanza actually suggested the name Captain Marvel, and in the comics, Billy Batson would say the wizard's name, Shazam, and be granted the powers of that wizard and transformed into the adult superhero, his best self. Captain Marvel, Captain Thunder, Shazam, whatever you want to call it, started selling in droves. It outsold Superman, and it was being published bi-weekly, and it even introduced a ton of new spin-off characters. Captain Marvel was actually the first superhero comic to be turned into a feature film, back in 1941, called The Adventures of Captain Marvel, starring Tom Tyler.
Where's Miss Wallace? I don't know.
At the time, DC was known as Detective Comics, and Superman Inc. was a separate entity that was dealing with trying to franchise Superman, and they were like, hey, stop it. They decided to put out a cease and desist in 1941 to stop Fawcett Comics from producing any more Captain Marvel comics and also Adventures of Captain Marvel.
Fawcett Comics were like, nah, and they ignored the cease and desist letter, and they continued making Captain Marvel stories and finished releasing that serial movie. So it took 7 years before the lawsuit finally reached the court. DC was suing Fawcett Comics for copyright infringement. The shady part, though, is that Captain Marvel was still making stories in print, and DC kind of adapted these things into Superman, right? You had Captain Marvel introduced his arch enemy, Dr. Sivana, who makes his feature film debut in Shazam.
Give me your power. Or die.
Oh, snap.
Superman introduced Lex Luthor just 2 months after they introduced Dr. Sivana. Captain Marvel was flying in them. Superman couldn't originally fly in the comics, so he could fly now. And on top of that, they introduced Captain Marvel Jr., who was a sidekick. They came out with Superboy in 1945.
While you could say that they were borrowing from each other, one could also make the argument that DC felt threatened and were actually stealing back from Fawcett in a much less inspired way, one that was fueled by frustration.
Captain Marvel and Fawcett Comics initially won the court hearing in 1948. Fawcett showed evidence of Captain Marvel performing heroic tasks similar to Superman, but in earlier publications. DC Comics / Superman Inc., which had now merged into National Comics, issued an appeal in 1951, 3 years after the initial verdict.
And at that point in time, Fawcett was looking at comic book sales and they seemed to be declining. So they buckled and they made a deal with National Comics. They ceased their Captain Marvel stories. Captain Marvel actually went away for almost 20 years. 1966. Now we are meeting the second Captain Marvel.
Is it Shazam yet?
Shazam?
No, it's not Shazam yet, Phil. It's not DC's Captain Marvel. It's not Marvel's Captain Marvel. It's not even Fawcett's Captain Marvel. Stick with us here because now we have a fourth-party comic book company.
A new player has entered the game.
MF Enterprises uses the name because Fawcett only has the character, but the name can still be used. Now, this is not Captain Marvel that goes along with any of the other Captain Marvels. It's way out in left field. He's got strange powers such as being able to break off body parts, have them perform different tasks, being able to mentally alter internal functions to do whatever he wants, such as breathe underwater, time travel, and if you don't know what any of that means, you're not alone.
Neither do we. Fast forwarding to a much more simpler time, going from 1966 to 1967, Marvel Comics released their hero dubbed Captain Marvel, or mar-vell, and paid MF Enterprises $4,500 to stop using the name Captain Marvel. And we are now in the third use of the name Captain Marvel.
Is it Shazam yet, Phil?
Shazam? It's not Shazam yet, Alex. The character was a man who went by the alias of Dr. Walter Lawson. He was a member of the Kree race who went down to Earth to spy on the humans. But he found more similarities with humans than the Kree race and wanted to stay on Earth.
So now Marvel Comics has trademarked the name Captain Marvel, and we're getting a little bit closer to the Captain Marvel that we saw on the big screen earlier this year. But look over to DC's side of things, and they took to Fawcett Comics to license out the original Captain Marvel, so they had a character that they could rival Marvel Comics with. They licensed it out from 1972 till 1991, when they outright bought the character from Fawcett, pushing Fawcett Comics out of the picture completely. But of course, because Marvel Comics has Captain Marvel, they had to change the name.
Is it Shazam yet? Shazam?
It's Shazam! We did it! We got there. It's Shazam.
But wait, we're not done yet.
We're not done yet?
Nope. We still have to talk about the Carol Danvers version of Captain Marvel.
Oh,
Rewind back to 1977. Rewind back to 1977. Carol Danvers came in as the female spin-off to Captain Marvel. She was the female counterpart known as Miss Marvel, kind of similar to Batgirl and Supergirl. She had her own adventures and her own identity, and she went on her own stories. Meanwhile, the person using the Captain Marvel mantle in Marvel Comics kept shifting, as Marvel does with their characters. Kind of like how Bucky became Captain America from Steve Rogers, or Thor became a horse. True story. Until 2012, when Carol Danvers stepped into the role of Captain Marvel officially under the advice of Captain America.
So your body's changing. Believe me, I know how that feels.
So after 35 years from 1977 to 2012, Carol Danvers becomes the 7th iteration. She finally takes on the mantle of Captain Marvel, and the one that the film is based on.
So there you have it. A complete breakdown of the use of Captain Marvel name from all the comic publishers. To make a long story short, DC got the character from a third party, and Marvel got the name from a fourth party.
Wow, that's a lot simpler. So here we are present day, and it's really fascinating to see that after everything these characters have been through, all of the history that they share, all the different directions that they've taken, they're here, they're duking it out once again, this time on the big screen, and they're less than a month apart from each other.
In other two films, we think Shazam was the better of them. But to be honest, comparing them can really only be done in name. They're just too different in every kind of way and aspect to compare them and anything else.
Agreed, but DC wins this round.
You're such hypocrites. But speaking of agree, we have a weekly segment called Agree or Disagree where we talk about the newest releases. We kind of bicker and banter and hash out our likes and dislikes of the film. We have a Shazam Agree or Disagree segment, and we have a Captain Marvel Agree or Disagree segment on our channel from a couple weeks ago. So be sure to check out our channel, The Fourth Act, for those and other movie-related videos that we release very, very regularly. Do the rush hour stance. What?
Yes, please do. Start a conversation below, leave a comment. Did you think that Captain Marvel got its name from Marvel Comics themselves? I did. I was wrong. If you thought that, you're wrong too.
You're stupid.
Please like and subscribe.
Or don't.
Damn it, Phil! Please be professional. I mean, do what you want, but please like and subscribe.
You have free will.
Oh my god. Bye.
Adios.